In the summer of 1992, in a small village in Zhejiang province, China, a farmer decided to drain a pond that had been sitting near his home for as long as anyone could remember. The pond had no known bottom. Villagers said it had always been there, calm and deep, a piece of the landscape that no one questioned. But the farmer wanted to expand his land, and curiosity won over tradition. He and his neighbors brought out pumps and began to drain the water. Hour after hour, the water line sank, and then, as the mud cleared, the pump began pulling air instead of water. At the bottom of the pond, the men saw something impossible, a rectangular opening cut directly into solid rock, a doorway, not a cave entrance, but something carved by human hands. They climbed down with ropes and lanterns. What they found would rewrite history. Beneath the pond lay a massive underground chamber, silent and dry. The walls were smooth and polished, lined with uniform chisel marks that ran in perfect parallel from floor to ceiling. The ceiling itself rose high above, carved into sweeping arches. The room was vast, larger than a cathedral, and yet it was entirely empty. When word reached the local authorities, archaeologists and engineers arrived within days. They discovered that the first chamber was only the beginning. As they mapped the area, they found another cave and another. By the end of the first survey, they had found 24 separate caverns, each one carved from the same sandstone layer, each following the same geometric precision. Together, the Longyou Caves covered an area of over 30,000 square meters. Each chamber measured up to 100 feet high and contained pillars, steps, platforms, and symmetrical walls decorated with swirling patterns of tool marks. But there was nothing else. No statues, no inscriptions, no carvings of kings or gods, no traces of smoke or habitation. Only the silent rhythm of the chisel lines, as if the builders wanted the stone itself to speak. The engineers were baffled. The sandstone was hard and brittle, not the kind of rock easily shaped by hand tools. Even with modern equipment, carving such spaces would be a monumental task. Estimates suggested that removing the amount of stone required to create the caves would have taken hundreds of workers decades of continuous labor. Yet the chambers showed no signs of collapse, no mistakes, no half-finished sections. Every angle was exact, every wall measured, every line aligned with the others. It was as if the builders had worked with a plan more advanced than anything known from their time. The caves showed no evidence of scaffolding or lighting soot. The ceilings were clean, suggesting illumination by methods unknown. Perhaps mirrors or light reflected through water, though neither could account for the brightness needed to work so deep underground. The temperature inside remained constant, around 68 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of the weather outside. The air was perfectly breathable, circulating through natural vents that no one had yet found. Everything about Longyou seemed designed, and yet no record existed of its creation. China's dynastic histories, stretching back thousands of years, mention great walls, palaces, canals, and cities, but not these caves. No inscription, no imperial decree, no legend or poem speaks of them. It was as if an entire monumental project had been erased from the story of the nation. Archaeologists compared the tool marks with known periods of Chinese history. The parallel grooves on the walls matched no technique used in the last 2,000 years. Some believed they resembled early Qin dynasty work, dating to around 200 BCE. Others thought they were older still, perhaps built during the Warring States period. or even before written Chinese civilization began. If so, the Longyou Caves might predate the Great Wall itself. But without inscriptions or datable artifacts, there was no way to know for certain. Only the silence of the stone remained. Local villagers had walked above the caves for generations, never realizing what lay beneath their feet. The ponds that covered the entrances had preserved them perfectly, protecting the caverns from erosion, collapse, or discovery. Had the farmer not decided to drain his pond, they might have remained hidden for another 1,000 years. When the government sent in a research team, they spent months documenting the caves. Their findings were extraordinary. Each chamber appeared unique in layout but identical in technique. The walls sloped at precise angles, and the chisel patterns were perfectly uniform, as if produced by machines. In one cave, a massive pillar stood in the center, supporting the roof like the heart of a temple. In another, a series of terraces descended toward what looked like an altar or stage. The geometry suggested design, a plan executed with intention, not random excavation. Yet the purpose remained unknown. If the caves were tombs, there should have been sarcophagi or offerings. If they were quarries, there should have been debris or tool fragments. If they were storage or military shelters, there should have been traces of habitation, fire pits, ceramics, or organic material. There was nothing, not a single tool, bone, or artifact, only stone and silence. Chinese archaeologists called them the ninth wonder of the ancient world. But behind that title lay frustration. No one could explain how or why they had been made. Some theorized that the caves were built by an unknown kingdom that vanished before written history. Others suggested they were part of an imperial project later erased from records, perhaps by dynastic collapse or deliberate censorship. A few ventured even stranger possibilities, that they were ritual spaces, acoustic chambers for sound resonance, or star maps encoded in stone. And still others whispered what locals had long believed, that the caves were not built for the living at all, but for something else. When villagers drained the ponds, they spoke of a deep humming that rose from below as the last water vanished. They said the air that came out was cold and metallic, like breath after a long sleep. Some refused to go near the openings again. They said the ponds were sacred, and that draining them had wakened what was meant to stay buried. Of course, scientists dismissed those fears, but even they could not deny the unease that settled inside the caves. When the lights were switched off, the darkness was absolute, so thick it felt alive. Sound carried strangely, echoing from unseen corners. More than one explorer described hearing faint rhythms, as if footsteps or tools still worked somewhere beyond the walls. Maybe it was just the acoustics, or maybe, as one researcher wrote, the caves remember. The deeper teams went, the more questions arose. The sandstone dust should have filled the chambers during construction, yet no trace of it remains. No dump site for the excavated material has ever been found, not a single mound of debris in the surrounding countryside. Where did millions of cubic feet of stone go? Even the direction of the chisel marks suggested organized labor. Each wall shows consistent diagonal patterns, always moving downward from right to left. It implied that hundreds of workers followed the same motion, perhaps trained or directed under a single plan. But without writing, without artifacts, there is no way to know what language they spoke or who gave the orders. The caves of Longyou are a mystery in every sense, physical, historical, and philosophical. They challenged the timeline of civilization itself, hinting at knowledge lost to time. A people capable of carving mountains with perfect symmetry, yet choosing to leave no trace of themselves behind. When the first explorers stood in those vast halls and raised their flashlights, the beams disappeared into shadow before reaching the ceiling. The silence was so complete that their own breathing echoed like thunder, and as they turned in slow circles, looking up at walls covered in the marks of forgotten hands, one thought must have passed through all their minds. This was not supposed to exist. When engineers began studying the Longyou Caves, they quickly realized they were dealing with something far beyond ordinary excavation. This was not a random network of tunnels, nor a natural formation improved by humans. It was deliberate architecture, a vast construction project cut directly into solid sandstone, created with precision that even today would demand detailed planning and complex coordination. Each chamber had been carved with smooth, angular surfaces. Every wall followed the same angle of incline, the same orientation of tool marks, the same rhythm of geometry. That consistency alone made no sense. In ancient times, when carving rock by hand, tool patterns normally vary wildly from worker to worker, vertical, horizontal, diagonal. But at Longyou, the grooves move in perfect harmony, as if hundreds of hands work together with machine-like discipline. When researchers measured the pattern, they found the chisel grooves ran almost exactly 1 inch apart, each stroke clean and evenly spaced from the next. They covered every inch of surface, ceiling, walls, pillars, as though applied intentionally to decorate or symbolize something. Some believed the pattern might have held meaning, perhaps a code or ceremonial texture. Others thought it was simply a finishing style, proof of the builder's pride in perfection. Yet no one could explain how such precision could be achieved inside caves this massive. The largest chamber rises nearly 100 feet high, with a base covering thousands of square feet. Each one was carved entirely by hand, without evidence of scaffolding or ladders. The builders would have needed lighting, airflow, and a way to remove debris. But the ceilings are spotless, no soot, no torch marks, and the ventilation system remains a mystery. No openings lead to the surface, yet the air stays cool and fresh. Even the structure itself defies expectations. Sandstone is brittle and prone to collapse when carved at large scales. Yet the ceilings and walls of Longyou have stood for thousands of years without reinforcement, without cracks, without even dust falling from above. Modern engineers studying the caves have admitted that reproducing such stability today with modern tools would be incredibly difficult. It's estimated that removing the volume of rock from just one of the 24 caves would have required at least 1,000 workers laboring continuously for years. For the entire complex, the figure rises to millions of cubic feet of stone, more than the volume of the Great Pyramid of Giza, and yet there is no record of the work. No quarry nearby, no debris piles, no storage site for the excavated rock. The question became not only how they carved the caves, but where the material went. The absence of evidence was itself a kind of message, one that left experts unsettled. Whoever built Longyou had mastered not just engineering but erasure. They built a wonder, then erased every sign of their effort. It was as if they wanted the caves to exist, but not their own memory. Some Chinese historians proposed that the caves might date to the early Qin dynasty, built under imperial order and later sealed when the empire collapsed. But the Qin were famous for documentation, records of every laborer, every brick, every stone. If the emperor had commissioned such an immense project, there would be evidence somewhere in the archives. There was none. Others suggested they were older still, perhaps the work of a forgotten culture, one that flourished before recorded history and vanished without trace. The region around Longyou has been inhabited for tens of thousands of years. Archaeological remains nearby show evidence of Stone Age communities, Neolithic villages, and early Bronze Age settlements. Could one of these cultures have possessed knowledge we've since lost? The ancient Chinese texts, known as the Shan Hai Jing, or Classic of Mountains and Seas, describe civilizations ruled by beings who lived beneath the mountains and carved the stone like water. For centuries, scholars treated it as myth, poetic allegory rather than memory. But the discovery of the caves has made some wonder if those stories were fragments of truth. Perhaps the people who carved Longyou were not mythical at all, simply forgotten. When modern teams attempted to replicate the chisel patterns using ancient tools, the results were inconsistent. Bronze chisels dulled too quickly. Iron tools made deeper, uneven cuts. Only with steel could workers match the precision of the marks. Yet steel in that region would not appear until thousands of years later. It suggested a contradiction. Either the caves were carved far later than believed, or the builders possessed technology history doesn't acknowledge. The pattern of the grooves, uniform, downward, and perfectly aligned, hinted that the builders might have used large templates or measuring systems. But again, no measuring tools were found, no fragments of wood, no metal traces, no artifacts of any kind. It was as if the builders vanished the moment their work was done. Inside one chamber, researchers found raised platforms and steps leading to a flat space that looked like a stage or altar. The acoustics there were unusual. Even a whisper carries clearly across the entire room, amplified by the shape of the walls. That discovery led some to suggest that the caves were not living spaces at all, but temples or ceremonial halls. The repeating patterns, the deliberate geometry, the sound resonance, all pointed to design with symbolic purpose. If true, Longyou might represent an ancient spiritual technology, not just architecture, a place where sound, geometry, and stone interacted, where rituals could transform space into meaning. Some historians saw parallels with the great underground complexes of other civilizations, the Egyptian catacombs, the rock-hewn churches of Ethiopia, the subterranean cities of Cappadocia in Turkey. Different continents, different ages, yet the same instinct to go below, to carve the earth itself into a sacred home. Was this coincidence or memory? Had ancient people across the world once shared knowledge of how to build beneath the surface, knowledge now lost to us? Among the more daring theories was one proposed by independent researchers who suggested that Longyou might have been an ancient archive, a vault designed to outlast the surface world. Its smooth, undecorated walls, its durability, its constant temperature, all ideal conditions for long-term preservation. If so, the chambers may once have held scrolls, objects, or artifacts that were later removed. Perhaps the purpose of Longyou was not worship or shelter, but memory, a library of stone designed to endure even when civilizations fell. But if that were true, who emptied it? And why did they erase their own records afterward? The mystery deepened when radar scans showed possible extensions beyond the mapped caves, blocked tunnels leading into the hills. Some appear natural, others clearly carved. But exploration stopped due to the risk of collapse. To this day, only a fraction of the underground system has been safely explored. Standing inside those open chambers today, you can feel how deliberate everything is. The symmetry is not random. The air is not still. It moves gently, though no one can find the vents. The stone feels warm to the touch, almost polished, as though it remembers being worked by countless hands. If these truly were temples, they were unlike any other on earth. No idols, no altars, no offerings, only geometry and silence. The builders seemed to worship the act of creation itself. They carved beauty from the earth and left without asking for recognition. It is this absence that makes Longyou so haunting. Most monuments speak of power, kings, empires, gods. But Longyou speaks of humility. It hides its grandeur underground, away from sunlight and praise, as if greatness itself belonged in darkness. When archaeologists switch off their lamps, the silence that fills the chamber feels ancient, almost conscious. You can hear the faint hum of your own breath bouncing between walls carved by people whose names are dust. And in that moment, it's hard not to wonder if the real mystery of Longyou is not how it was built, but why we stopped building like this. For more than 3 decades, researchers have studied the Longyou Caves. They've mapped the walls, measured the geometry, studied the chisel marks, analyzed the sandstone, and yet the same question remains unanswered. Why were they built? No one constructs something on this scale without purpose. 24 enormous chambers carved with perfection, aligned with mathematical precision, all empty. No evidence of daily life, no carvings or inscriptions to honor gods or emperors, no signs of conflict or burial. Only silence, as though the builders wanted the stone itself to be their message. Each theory offers an explanation, but none fit perfectly. And so, the caves sit at the intersection of mystery and logic, a place where history meets something older than memory. One of the earliest theories proposed that Longyou was a massive underground quarry, that ancient builders extracted sandstone blocks for construction elsewhere. At first glance, it seemed plausible. The tool marks, the uniform walls, the sheer scale, all could belong to a site of large-scale extraction. But when engineers examined the walls more closely, they realized this couldn't be the case. If the caves were quarries, the tool marks would vary according to function. Rough cuts for removal, smoother finishes only were visible. Instead, every surface, from the deepest corners to the highest ceilings, was meticulously smoothed and patterned. No one puts that level of effort into something meant to be abandoned. The second theory suggested the caves were tombs, monumental burial chambers for ancient rulers. China's long tradition of grand tomb architecture, like the mausoleum of Emperor Qin Shi Huang, seemed to support this idea. But tombs always contain remains, grave goods, inscriptions, some sign of their purpose. Longyou contains none. It feels less like a resting place for the dead and more like a statement from the living. Another theory claims that the caves were part of an ancient flood control or storage system built to hold grain or water during droughts. But the design contradicts that. The chambers are vast, yet their entrances are narrow, making large-scale transport impractical. The floors are sloped and uneven, not suitable for liquid storage, and there are no channels or reservoirs connecting the caves. They were never meant to hold, they were meant to endure. As science failed to explain it, new ideas emerged, some strange, some poetic. A few researchers noticed how sound travels through the chambers. In one cave, even a whisper can be heard clearly across the far wall. In another, footsteps echo in rhythmic pulses, amplifying and fading like a drumbeat. The acoustics are so refined that some suspect they were designed intentionally. If so, Longyou may have been a ceremonial space, a temple where sound itself was part of worship. Imagine standing in total darkness, torches flickering against the stone, voices chanting in unison, their echoes overlapping in patterns that seem to circle the chamber. The vibrations moving through air and stone alike, resonating in the body as much as in the ear. If these halls were built for such rituals, they were built by people who understood sound on a level we are only beginning to rediscover. Across the world, similar structures exist. The hypogeum of Malta, the underground chambers of Egypt, the rock temples of India, each showing acoustic effects that seem deliberate. Perhaps Longyou belongs to that same forgotten lineage, where ancient architecture was not just physical but spiritual, where the very shape of stone could influence the human soul. Then there is the most unsettling possibility that the caves were designed as places of refuge. Hidden beneath ponds, invisible from above, they could have sheltered thousands during times of disaster. The air inside remains fresh, the temperature stable, and the thick sandstone walls would have offered protection from both heat and cold. Could Longyou have been built during a period of cataclysm, war, famine, or something even greater? Perhaps an ancient people fled underground, built their temples to survive, and when the danger passed, left without returning. If so, what was that danger? Some point to geological evidence of massive floods and environmental upheaval thousands of years ago, events that reshaped landscapes and wiped out entire cultures. Others suggest volcanic activity or cosmic impacts, stories preserved in myths about fire from the sky and the sun that vanished. In that context, Longyou could have been a sanctuary, humanity's first underground ark. The idea may sound far-fetched, but it explains the perfection. A civilization on the edge of extinction might build not for comfort, but for survival. They would carve deep, seal the entrances, and wait, trusting the earth to protect them. When the danger passed, perhaps they emerged to find their world changed, or perhaps they never emerged at all. Whatever their reason, the builders of Longyou left nothing behind but the mark of their hands. Their silence feels deliberate, almost sacred, as if they wanted the mystery to outlive them. Modern visitors describe a strange feeling when walking through the caves. The temperature never changes. The air carries no scent of decay or dust. It feels clean, untouched. And in that emptiness, the mind begins to fill the space with its own echoes. You start to imagine them, the workers, the planners, the voices calling instructions that no longer exist. You picture the glow of oil lamps moving across whetstone, the soft scrape of chisels, the rhythm of 1,000 hammers. Generation after generation carving the same walls, guided by a plan they could not see in full, only trust. And then, one day, the work stops. The lamps are extinguished, the chambers are sealed, and the earth swallows their memory whole. When the first explorers entered, they disturbed that stillness for the first time in millennia. Some said the air felt heavy, as if the place resented being awakened. Others described a sense of awe, the feeling of standing inside something older than civilization itself. Whatever it is, Longyou is not just an archaeological site. It is a message in stone, written by hands that understood both time and silence. Somewhere within that message lies the answer. Was this the work of an empire we've forgotten? A ritual monument for gods whose names have turned to dust? A sanctuary built by survivors of a vanished world? Or something else entirely? Something we are not yet ready to understand. What makes the mystery of Longyou so powerful is that it defies ownership. No culture claims it, no religion explains it, no text records it. It belongs to everyone, to all of human history, and to none of it. It stands outside of time, whispering that our story may be far older and far stranger than we believe. Perhaps one day the sealed tunnels will be opened. Perhaps inside lies the missing piece, an inscription, a relic, a single symbol that reveals the truth. But until then, the Longyou Caves remain what they have always been, a riddle carved in stone, waiting for someone to listen closely enough to hear what it's trying to say. When the first man drained his pond in 1992, he wasn't looking for history. He simply wanted more land, a bit more space for his home. He could never have imagined that beneath that still water lay a doorway into another world, a world carved by hands older than memory. When the water vanished, the earth inhaled, and from that breath came the first glimpse of the Longyou Caves, waiting patiently beneath the soil, untouched for thousands of years. Since then, the caves have changed everything we thought we knew about the past. They've challenged archaeology, humbled engineering, and invited wonder. But perhaps their greatest power is not in what they show us, but in what they refuse to reveal. Because Longyou is not loud. It doesn't shout its greatness from mountaintops or boast through monuments above the clouds. It hides in silence. And sometimes silence speaks more truth than words ever could. When archaeologists descend into the caves, they enter that silence. The deeper they go, the quieter it becomes, until even their own breathing feels intrusive. The light of their flashlights fades before it reaches the ceiling. The walls, etched with perfect chisel marks, seem to absorb sound instead of reflecting it. It's a silence that isn't empty. It's alive, aware, almost protective. Standing there, you begin to understand that this was not a place of fear or desperation. It was a place of intention. Everything about it, the symmetry, the acoustics, the endurance, feels like the product of minds who understood the earth as something sacred. We often think of progress as moving upward, taller buildings, higher towers, closer to the sky. But the builders of Longyou looked in the opposite direction. They went down, into the ground, into the heart of the world itself, as if they knew that what we seek above is often hidden below. Perhaps that's what makes Longyou so haunting. It reminds us that civilizations are not just measured by what they build, but by what they preserve. And here, in the quiet chambers beneath Zhejiang, someone preserved something more precious than gold: the memory of mastery, the proof that humanity has always known how to endure. No empire claims these caves, no inscription ties them to a name or a dynasty. They belong to no one, and in that they belong to everyone. They are the voice of the forgotten, the anonymous architects of eternity. For centuries, the ponds above protected them, like lids on sleeping eyes. Only when drained did those eyes open again, blinking into the modern world. And what they saw was us, people who had built skyscrapers, satellites, and machines to touch the stars. yet who still could not understand the stone beneath their feet. That irony is part of Longyou's quiet power. It humbles us. It reminds us that no matter how far we advance, there are still mysteries older than our tools, older than our science, older than our pride. When engineers first examined the walls, they expected flaws, stress cracks, misaligned pillars, weak ceilings. They found none. The structure was perfect. Even after 2,000 years or more, it stood unbroken, a feat of endurance that defied erosion, earthquakes, and time itself. The builders didn't just carve stone, they understood it. They knew its balance, its breadth, its limits. They worked with the earth, not against it. That harmony is something our modern world often forgets. We build quickly, we build upward, but we rarely build to last. The people of Longyou built once, and it lasted forever. Every time someone enters the caves, they leave changed. They walk back into the sunlight with a different kind of awareness. That beneath the noise of modern life, there is a silence waiting for us. A silence that reminds us where we came from. It's easy to imagine the last day the builders stood there, the final hammer echoing through the chamber, the flicker of a torch, a group of workers stepping back to admire what they had created. They must have felt pride, not for wealth or conquest, but for beauty itself. They had carved perfection out of darkness. Then, perhaps, they sealed the entrances, filled the ponds, and walked away, leaving their work to sleep. Centuries passed. The ponds became part of the landscape. Villagers fished in them, unaware that beneath their boats lay temples carved in silence. And then, one day, the earth woke up. When that farmer broke through the surface, he didn't just open a hole in the ground, he opened a hole in history. Through it, we caught a glimpse of something rare, the realization that the timeline of human civilization might be far longer and far deeper than we think. Because if a culture capable of building Longyou existed before recorded history, then what else have we lost? What other monuments sleep beneath our feet, their entrances hidden beneath rivers, forests, deserts, or ice? How many times has humanity risen, fallen, and risen again, each time leaving behind whispers in stone? The Longyou Caves are not just a mystery, they are a mirror. They reflect a truth about all civilizations, that one day we too will become silent. Our cities will crumble, our languages will fade, and our monuments will turn to dust. And perhaps, thousands of years from now, someone will find what we built and ask the same question we ask today: how and why? That is what connects us to the builders of Longyou. Not the tools, not the technology, but the desire to be remembered, even if we cannot leave our names behind. When you stand inside those ancient halls, you feel that connection. It's as if time folds inward. The air feels heavy, not from age, but from meaning. The walls whisper without words. And for a moment, you realize that the distance between them and us is not thousands of years. It's a heartbeat. Every civilization leaves behind echoes. The people of Longyou left theirs in stone. We leave ours in light and sound, in data and steel. But all of it, every empire, every achievement, will one day fade into the same silence. Maybe that's why the caves exist. Maybe they're not just monuments but messages. A reminder that even in darkness, humanity finds a way to create beauty. That when everything else disappears, creation remains. At the entrance of the first cave, near where the pond once lay, there's a small plaque now, placed by the Chinese government describing the site as a cultural wonder of the ancient world. Visitors stop, read it, and take photographs. But few realize that beneath their feet stretch chambers that no map fully captures, carved by hands that no history remembers. The tourists eventually leave. The lights are turned off and the silence returns, deep, complete, eternal. That's when the caves are most themselves. No footsteps, no voices, only the earth breathing slowly, guarding its secrets. It's said that in the deepest chamber, when you stand alone and close your eyes, you can hear a faint rhythm, a pulse in the stone like a heartbeat. Perhaps it's the echo of your own, or perhaps it's the memory of those who built this place, still alive within the walls, still whispering their story to anyone willing to listen. We don't know their names. We don't know their gods. We don't know their language. But we know this. They wanted to be remembered, and they were. The Longyou Caves remain, carved into the bones of the earth, untouched by time, unbroken by history. A message from the deep past that says, we were here, we endured, we created. And in that message, carved across centuries, we find a reflection of ourselves. Because no matter how far we rise or how much we build, in the end, we are all just trying to do the same thing, to leave something behind that will outlast the silence.